Early in the morning on December 9th, 2014, an emergency call comes into a British call center. An employee answers the call and quickly becomes so annoyed that she wants to hang up, probably with good reason. On the other end of the line are two teenage girls who are apparently very drunk. They are calling for the second time. They want the police to come and pick them up because they are cold and want to be taken home. The employee must have thought many things, but she certainly didn't think that the two cheeky but harmless-sounding girls had just tortured someone to death. Not much is known about Angela Wrightson, which is indicative of her life story. She comes from a large working-class family and grew up in public housing. As an adult, she eventually distanced herself from her family. Angela is an alcoholic and finds it difficult to take care of herself. As a result, she is severely underweight, which means she is often very cold. Even in summer, she always wears several layers of clothing. She spends time in jail every now and then, not because she commits serious crimes, but because she keeps calling 911, probably out of desperation because no one is there for her. Angela lives at 14 Stephen Street in Hartlepool. She lives alone in an apartment in one of those typical English row houses. At times, Angela has a boyfriend named Billy, but he is also an alcoholic and eventually dies. Billy was probably the only partner Angela ever had, and his loss is a traumatic experience for her. As you can imagine, this only fuels her addiction even more. As hard as life has hit Angela, she has retained her warmth. Many people in her neighborhood know her because Angela usually sits on the steps in front of her row house and chats with anyone who passes by. In town, she's known as Drinking Angie. When she leaves the steps in front of her house, she heads to a nearby kiosk that sells cheap alcohol. Angie drinks several liters a day and is permanently intoxicated. Nevertheless, she often thinks about bringing chocolate bars from the kiosk to put in the mailbox for the little boy next door. She sits on the steps in front of the house in all weathers. Angela is happy about everyone who stops and takes the time for a short chat. It is not uncommon for her to invite people she likes directly into her apartment. Of course, this is not without risk. That's why Angela's neighbors keep an eye on her as much as they can. They check on Angela from time to time, and if they notice strange people in Angie's apartment, they throw them out. However, most of the single woman's visitors are harmless. They are mostly lonely people who have turned to alcohol. They have names like Cider Bill, Goofy, and Mad Molly. In December 2014, Angie invites two teenage girls to her home. It will be the last time Angela sits on the stairs and opens her door to someone. The names of the two girls have been anonymized. In this video, we call them Olivia and Jasmine. This is also what the BBC does in a 2017 article that refers to police documents. As mentioned, these are not their real names. We explain why we do this in the next chapter. But first, let's turn to December 8th, 2014, the day Angela's life ended. Olivia is 14 years old. Jasmine is 13. Olivia lives in a children's home. Jasmine in a foster family. They both have free time that afternoon. In the evening, they are supposed to return to their respective accommodations, but they don't. Olivia uses her day off to visit her mother. Olivia was placed in the home because she was regularly subjected to violence at home. Olivia started drinking alcohol and taking drugs at the age of 11 and ran away from home in the children's home. When she arrives at her mother's door that afternoon, the 14-year-old is rebuffed. Her mother is reported to have greeted her with the words, "F you." Why don't you get the f out of here and kill yourself? This leads to an argument between mother and daughter, which ends with Olivia's sister picking her up and taking her away. As she leaves, her mother slips the 14-year-old some strong sedatives and alcohol. At the same time, Angela's also having a really bad day. Her landlord came by in the afternoon and she had an argument with him. She was already drunk at the time. Eventually, as she often does, she sits down in front of her front door. At that moment, Olivia and her friend Jasmine walk by. The three strike up a conversation. Angela agrees to buy alcohol and cigarettes for the two girls. Of course, we don't know exactly what Angela's thinking. She's probably just happy to have some company. The girls wait in Angela's living room. As promised, she goes to get alcohol and cigarettes, then returns home to the girls. In total, the three of them drink 6 liters of cider that evening. Traces of drugs and medication are later found in Olivia's system. These may have been the sedatives her mother gave her that afternoon. But that evening doesn't end with a hangover and a sore head. The evening ends with a dead body. When Olivia and Jasmine leave Angie's house, Angie has at least 70 cuts all over her body. In addition, there are 54 injuries caused by blunt force. More than half of her injuries are to her head or face. Angie tried to defend herself and suffered further defensive injuries. These include 3 broken fingers. At least 27 of the blows to Angela were inflicted with 14 different objects. These include a table, a television, a printer, a shovel, picture frames, pots and vases, a kettle, a metal sieve, and a wooden spoon. In other words, a violent crime of the most evil and brutal kind. It is believed that Angela's ordeal must have lasted several hours. Shortly after 9 p.m., a selfie is taken with Jasmine's cell phone, which she posts on Snapchat. It shows her and Olivia with Angie in the background. The photo shows that a hematoma is already forming on Angie's face. At this point, the girls must have already been beating her, and they continue to do so throughout the evening. Before midnight, they take a break. They leave Angela injured in her apartment and go to a friend's house, only to return at 2 a.m. on December 9th. However, they did not come back to help Angie, but to continue torturing her. 2 hours later, shortly after 4 a.m., Olivia and Jasmine finally leave. It is not known whether Angie is only unconscious or already dead at this point. However, it is clear that Olivia and Jasmine simply leave her lying there, without a trace of remorse. The two call the police, but not to report the attack on Angela, but to be picked up. They suspect that their caregivers have reported them missing and apparently think it's a good idea to use the emergency number as if it were a taxi company.
Hello, can you please?
I was just rang. When is it going to come? Freezing.
Sorry, you what? Hello?
I just reported myself missing. Leave me alone. I've just...
You reported yourself missing?
I'm sick, no.
Shouting in my ear, can you just, what are you on?
Like, I've just rang to let the police know where me and my friend are at. Will you tell me how long it's going to be? I'm freezing, so it was wrong bad.
Then? There's no need to be swearing, ringing up and swearing and going on like that. What's your name?
I'm cold.
What's your name? Right, and where are you? Suggett Street?
Yeah. Stephen Street.
Pardon? You're in Stephen Street?
Yeah.
What's so funny?
No, you're just was funny.
I'm not being funny.
Sure.
Right. So, listen, right, you're in Stephen Street. We'll get somebody along there as soon as we can, alright?
Yeah, but I'm afraid I'm a bit cold.
Right, okay. Bye.
Bye.
Angela Wrightson's body is found by her landlord on the morning of December 9th. After the argument the day before, he returned to clear things up, but he is unable to speak to Angela. She is already dead, and the apartment is completely trashed. Angela is naked from the waist down and lying on her sofa covered in blood. Both girls are arrested on December 9th after talking to friends about the crime and even discussing possible prison sentences. And of course, something like that doesn't stay secret for long. This drawing is later found in Olivia's room at the home. It shows a graphic image of one person injuring another with a knife. The case causes widespread consternation throughout the UK, especially on social media. As one might expect, the comment sections of news outlets reporting on the story are flooded with all manner of insults directed at Olivia and Jasmine. This, in turn, also catches the attention of the police. As a result, in June 2015, they instruct the press to remove all comments about the trial from all posts and to close the comment functions. All hyperlinks in news articles must also be deleted. Sharing articles about the trial against Olivia and Jasmine is also to be banned. The BBC and other media outlets took action against this, but without success. From that point on, no further reporting on the trial was allowed until the verdict was handed down. This was to protect Olivia and Jasmine and prevent them from being prejudged by society. Angie's mother eventually found it impossible to attend the court hearings. Hearing over and over again how badly her daughter was treated and how little remorse her murderers showed completely devastated her. Both girls were ultimately sentenced to life imprisonment, even though they were only 13 and 14 at the time of the crime. However, they can apply for release after 15 years. This means that they will have served 2/3 of their sentences. How they are doing in prison, whether they are following the rules, and whether they really have a chance of being released is unknown. This is because the true identities of Olivia and Jasmine are still protected. In October 2020, there will even be a new hearing on the anonymity of the two girls. It is decided that Olivia and Jasmine's anonymity should be protected for life, so we will never know their real names. This is to prevent their return to society from being made more difficult, or the two from being subjected to any hostility. In theory, however, this is not set in stone. This ruling could change again, but probably only if something serious happens. For example, if Olivia and Jasmine were to commit further crimes. If this is not the case, the two will have a new chance when they are released. To a new life, steady jobs, a home of their own, and perhaps a family. Everything that Angela can no longer have. And no one they meet will ever know what they did at the ages of 13 and 14. You're probably wondering, just like I did during my research, why Olivia and Jasmine did all this to Angela. Sure, the girls' stories are more than sad, and they grew up in terrible circumstances. But is that a reason to torture a woman to death? A BBC report quotes a very interesting source on this. Criminal investigator Carol N. Davis says that when children commit murder, whether boys or girls between the ages of 10 and 17, it is usually for personal reasons, but not necessarily someone they really know, but rather someone who reminds them of a hated person from their past, or someone in whom they see what they could become. Angela Wrightson also had an incredibly difficult childhood and later life. Her life story is not unlike that of her murderers. And so, it seems reasonable to assume that Olivia and Jasmine saw their own future in Angela's existence, marked by alcoholism and poverty, and took out their hatred for their future selves on Angela in a figurative sense, until her death. Feel free to write your thoughts on this in the comments, and also on the issue of anonymized names. Given that the perpetrators were only 13 and 14 when they murdered Angela, the move seems sensible. But such actions are often criticized. I would be interested to hear where you stand on this issue. Thank you in advance. By doing so, you'll also be supporting the channel, because any interaction increases the likelihood that the video will be recommended to people who haven't subscribed to Insolito yet. Other than that, there's not much more to say. Have a good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when you're watching this video, and I hope to see you again in the next video. Until then, bye everyone.